There's no planned fire alarm test today. If you do hear a fire alarm, please leave the room by the nearest exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is at St John's Churchyard off Druid Street, which is in that direction, down Tooley Street. Council security staff will be available to direct you. The public toilets are located off the main reception area in that direction. There is a refreshment machine that hopefully you've seen out in the main lobby for use by members of the public in the waiting area outside. An echo. Finally, could you please switch your mobile phones to silent whilst in the meeting. If you're certainly sitting at this end, it may be advisable to turn it off completely so it doesn't interfere with the microphones. This meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, so that you're aware. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph or tweet the proceedings of this meeting. I ask you to please be considerate towards other people in the room and take care not to disturb the proceedings. If you are filming the meeting, please do not film the audience. Direct any filming towards the tables in this direction. The code for accessing the Council's Wi-Fi is capital F, little r, 33, capital W, little I, little f, little I, exclamation mark. So that sort of spells Wi-Fi with an exclamation mark at the end, or free Wi-Fi with exclamation mark at the end. During the meeting, members of the committee will not access the internet except as it relates to the official business of the meeting, send or receive emails, text messages or tweets concerning the business of the committee. I'd also like to remind speakers to use their microphone when speaking, as only the audio from the microphones is captured on the live stream, and not to place their mobile devices next to the microphones to avoid interference. Before we proceed any further, I'd like to ask members of the committee and all those present in the audience to rise to observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect for Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Thank you. Okay, that brings us on to apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies for the meeting? I have received apologies from Councillor Nick Johnson and Councillor Ellie Cumbo, and Councillor Sarah King is here to act as a reserve for Councillor Cumbo. And I think everybody else is here. So no other apologies. So will the voting members of the committee indicate by raising their hands for the record? Thank you. So that's 7 votes. Notification of any items of business which the chair deems urgent. You'll hopefully have seen the addendum reports and the members' pack that you should have in front of you with some additional information. Disclosure of interests and dispensations. Does any member of the committee wish to declare an interest or dispensation in respect of any item or issue to be considered at the meeting? No, Chair. I've got a non-disclosable interest in that the item on the Green Buildings Fund is allocating money to a location in my ward, but that's not an interest which needs to be declared as I understand it. That brings us on to the minutes of the previous meeting. So we've got the minutes here for, first of all, the 19th of July 2022. Are people happy that those are a correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you. And we also have the minutes from the 26th of July 2022. Are those agreed as a correct record? Thank you. That brings us to item 6, the release of £700,703.45 of Section 106 funding from the Green Buildings Fund to fund Manor Grove Council Homes Refurbishment Programme. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Neil Lubster to introduce.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. My name is Neil Lubster. I am the team leader in the Section 106 team, and I'll be presenting advising members of the committee tonight in regards to Section 106 item number 6. This is to release 703.45 towards the refurbishment of Manor Grove Council homes. This money will be allocated from the Green Buildings Fund. The release of the £703 from the Council Green Building Fund will be funding the energy efficiency improvement works as part of the refurbishment of 18 council homes on Manor Grove within the Tustin estate. I just need to bring members' attention that these houses are in a poor state and urgently require works to bring up their energy efficiency. As of August 2020, the Council has collected 5.7 million towards carbon offset. The Council has currently allocated 578,154 pence of carbon offset payments. This will include 90,568 pounds, which was allocated to Canal Grove cottages, and this was approved in August 2021. A further 487,532 pounds was approved in July towards staff costs for the management of projects for energy efficiency, etc. Taking into account all the money that's already been allocated, that leaves us with an amount of £5,132,097, which is currently unallocated. The project that we are asking the money to be released tonight would be managed by the Climate Change Protection Team, which sits within the Environment and Social Regeneration Team, as well as the Housing and Moderation Team, the Modernisation Team, who will be involved for carrying out the works. Subsequent to this report, we have consulted with the neighbours in the area within the Tustin estate, and they have all supported the proposal and were voted in favour of the GLA compliant ballot and the proposal. The scope of work that we are proposing as the council towards the Green Fund would be to insulate these 18 houses, provide new roofs, solar panels to be erected, wall insulation, new double glazing windows, replacement of gas boiler systems with air source heat pump systems, including mechanism for ventilation and new radiators. The work that we are proposing would provide an estimate savings of 344 tonnes per year. The work is currently urgently needed, as I said, as the houses are in a very poor state, and the savings on carbon, the carbon tonnage would bring a big benefit towards our climate change and our climate emergency. I therefore respectfully ask our committee that we can release the 700,000 in order to do the works and regenerate these 18 council-owned houses.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Whittam.
Can you tell me how big these houses are?
Thank you, Chair. I've just tried to review the application which is currently running. I could not find it, and my colleague Osama would have been here presently this evening. Unfortunately, he has not made it. Oh, sorry, Osama is there. Osama is in our team, and he would be able to advise us on the size of these units.
Thank you. Osama, if you could introduce yourself to the committee for the record.
I'm Osama Shoosh. I'm a strategic lead in Southwark Construction, and I'm overseeing the Tustin Estate Rebuilding Project. So there is a range of sizes of homes, but they are larger homes. So there are 3 and 4 bed houses on Manor Grove.
Councillor Whittam?
Can I ask an unrelated question?
Depends how unrelated, but give it a go.
Surely the HRA should be paying for these repairs. How is the Green Building Fund and the HRA linked in order to pay for these works?
So these are more than repairs. These are substantial refurbishments of these properties. So the Green Building Fund is contributing approximately about a quarter of the cost of refurbishing the 18 homes. So 3/4 of it is being met from within the HRA. But this is substantial works to redo these homes, partly because of the poor condition they're in, but also the complexity of refurbishing them, because these are 18 homes in between other freeholder-owned homes, which means they can't all be done in one go. They have to be done individually, but substantial savings can be made in terms of the carbon offset rate, which is in the report. So this is the Green Building Fund delivering more carbon savings than the amount that was paid in.
Go for it.
Are there any leaseholders in these?
No, they're all freeholders. So not in the properties. In the 18 homes are all council tenants, but within Manor Grove there are a range of other homes that are freeholder owned. So all 18 homes are council tenants.
If there aren't any further questions, I had a question, which was, and I'm not quite sure who it would go to, it might be Neil, but it was really to understand how the council will be going around considering how to spend the other 5.1 million that's mentioned in the report. What the process is for that.
Chair, we have set up, or in the process of setting up a team, and we are following the guidance of what was originally in 2020 decided by Cabinet, how we would manage this pooled funds, and projects will be put forward towards us, and when we would see then if it's appropriate and if it brings benefit to the savings for carbon offset. I don't know if Osama want to just follow up on that, but we're in the process of recruiting a full team which will be managing this as their day-to-day responsibilities.
I don't have anything to directly add on that team and that process, but just that as part of our work looking across the housing that Southwark Council manages, where there are opportunities to deliver carbon savings using the Green Buildings Fund, that would be something we look at in future, so to support other refurbishments across the borough.
So the sort of answer to Councillor Whittam's earlier point is that future housing major works may include elements of this fund where that makes sense. Thank you. Councillor Whittam.
Just sort of one other question. These tenants, will they have to decant?
Yes, because of the scale of the refurbishments required, so new roofs, significant insulation added into the walls, new heating systems, we will be moving them within the estate. So the idea is that we'll probably do them in batches between 4 and 6 of across the 18 homes, so that we can move some residents into other empty homes on the estate, some residents into already refurbished homes on Manor Grove, and we think that sort of by shuffling people around, we can do it over the period of around about 18 months, and no one has to move away from the estate for that to happen.
So if they prefer the one that they moved into, can they stay in that one?
Yes, they can.
Councillor Papula.
So I can see here that this will be completed in tranches. I wanted to quickly find out if the itemised costs noted down in paragraph 26 will also factor in the build inflation that we're currently going through right now.
Yes, and it is based on a fixed cost that will be for the lifetime of all of the refurbishment works. So we've worked very closely with the contractor to make sure that the costs here are the costs we're going to be paying.
Any further questions? Any comments that anybody wishes to make? I wanted to make one, I'm afraid, and that was just because I was involved in the, as a cabinet member back then, on the development of some of this policy, and at that point we recognised that the amount of money the council was previously asking to carbon offset was insufficient for works, and so we raised the amount at that stage to the current £95 per tonne per year of carbon that needs to be where there's an offsetting requirement. So you'll see from the report that we are managing to offset carbon at a rate of £67.75. So actually, compared to that £90 that we're getting in, at least from future developments, it's actually quite cost efficient as a proposal. So having helped design the policy, I thought that was worth noting. Given that, if there's no further comments, I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraph 1 of the report on page 16 of the main agenda pack. The Planning Committee approves the release of £700,703.45 from the Council's Green Building Fund to fund energy efficiency improvement works as part of the refurbishment of up to 18 homes on Manor Grove within the Tustin estate as set out in the report. A more detailed breakdown of the funds will be drawn down, is included elsewhere in the report. Have I got a seconder for that recommendation? I think I marginally saw Councillor Whittam first. Councillor Whittam seconded that. Can I see all those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Normally we would take a roll call on these things, but I think as that was unanimous and it's not a development item, I didn't think that was necessary, but we will do for the development management items, which we are now moving on to. So next item of business concerns the determination of planning applications. I'd like to remind everyone on the committee of the guidance on how we conduct business. First of all, officers will present the report, outline the recommendations and answer questions raised by committee. If present and willing to speak, the following may then address the committee for no more than 3 minutes each. Firstly, a spokesperson representing any objectors to the application. By now you would needed to identify a single spokesperson. If there's more than one objector who wishes to speak, the time will be divided accordingly within the 3 minutes time slot. I understand we haven't had anybody yet registering, but if there is anybody within the audience that does wish to speak an objection, then please speak when we get to that item. We'll call you forward at that point. We then take the applicant or their agent. We then take a spokesperson representing any supporters of the application who live within 100 metres of the development site. And then we have a ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. Ward members in attendance and those nominated to speak on behalf of objectors, supporters and applicants should sit in the front row of the public gallery. This is for ease of communication between the committee and the Speaker in case there are any issues which need to be clarified later in the proceedings. It's not an opportunity to take part in the debate of the committee. Each speaker should restrict their comments to planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating information which is already in the report. The meeting is not a hearing where all participants present evidence This is not a hearing where all participants present evidence to be examined by other participants. At the end of each representation, the committee may ask questions of the presenter. Speakers should lead the committee to subjects on which they would welcome further questioning. After receiving all submissions, the committee will then debate the application and consider the recommendation. This is a council committee meeting which is open to the public and there should be no interruptions from the audience. Finally, I'd like everyone present to know that although the planning committee comprises members of different political parties, we are not politically whipped. Our decisions are made in accordance with the council's planning policy and based on information contained within the relevant reports, together with any consultation responses and any verbal submissions made here today. How we approach these applications set out in the Development Management Report at item 7 of the agenda, and if members are happy to note that report, we will move on to considering the planning applications. Are members happy to note that report?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to item 7.1, which is Church House, London Bridge Walk, London, SE1. I'll now invite Terence McClellan to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. The application site for the Church House application is located between Tooley Street, Duke Street Hill and Borough High Street, London Bridge, and it's shown on the screen behind you. It measures approximately 0.28 hectares in size and is currently occupied by Church House, which is a 1960s concrete commercial building which provides offices and retail floor space. The retail spaces are located at lower ground and first floor level, with all office accommodation located on the remaining upper levels. There is a car park with capacity for 15 cars located at lower ground floor level and accessed from Tooley Street. The application site also encompasses the majority of the existing footway on the north side of Duke Street Hill. An elevated walkway with a footbridge linking to London Bridge Station is provided above Duke Street Hill from the south of the site. The River Thames is located approximately 55 metres to the north. The existing building is of low architectural quality and is hampered by large expanses of inactive frontages on Tooley Street and Duke Street Hill, which further diminishes the appearance of the building and fails to contribute positively to the area. The elevated walkway, known as London Bridge Walk, and footbridge are busy routes during the morning and evening rush hour, however they're only lightly used outside of these times. The footbridge itself is a very dominant feature within the local landscape. The building is set within a hard landscaped public realm characterised by footways and street furniture, as well as some street trees. The western end of the site is marked by the Southwark Gateway Needle, a sculpture designed by Eric Pye, and the Borough High Street Conservation Area flanks the western boundary. The site is in a central and prominent location within London Bridge District Town Centre. The surrounding area is characterised by London Bridge Station and the significant commercial development surrounding it. The immediate area is predominantly commercial with some retail. There are also significant healthcare facilities in the area, with London Bridge Hospital immediately to the north and east of the site and Guy's Hospital campus to the south, on the opposite side of London Bridge Station. The surrounding townscape is varied and there's a range of building heights, including tall buildings such as the Shard at 306 metres, Guy's Hospital Tower at 142 metres, and the News International Building at 78 metres. To the lower rise buildings eastward along Tooley Street and further south within the Borough High Street Conservation Area. There are various tall buildings on the north side of the River Thames within the City of London. Planning consent is sought for the demolition of the existing Church House and redevelopment of the site to provide a new elevated 22-storey building with 4 levels of basement. The redevelopment would provide new offices, retail space, a gym, food and beverage outlets and a new theatre incorporating an ancillary bar. In land use terms, the proposed range of uses is considered acceptable and the proposal involves the provision of high-quality office floor space alongside retail, leisure and theatre space, which are acceptable town centre uses. The development would see a significant uplift in office accommodation on site of 38,932 square metres and the potential to provide up to 3,050 new jobs. This is in line with the site allocation in the Southwark plan. The provision of new offices is fully supported, and the provision of modern, high-quality offices is considered to be a benefit of the scheme that would facilitate the growth of employment within the central activity zone and the opportunity area. The proposed development would include a mix of uses that are appropriate for the site's location. The development would also provide a new theatre with ancillary bar. The theatre would have two venues of different capacities, 250 people for the main theatre and 150 for the second theatre, and both are proposed to have a flexible configuration. It's intended that it would be operated by Southwark Playhouse. London Plan Policy HC5 supports the development of new cultural venues in town centres and places with good public transport connectivity, and it should be noted that the site is within the strategic cultural area. The applicant proposes to satisfy the affordable workspace requirement through the provision of an affordable retail unit, an affordable Class E office space, and through providing the theatre as an affordable workspace. In floor space terms, the proposed offer equates to 8%. Policy P31 does allow for a commuted sum in exceptional circumstances to make up to the 10%. As such, the 2% affordable workspace shortfall would equate to approximately 939 square metres. This would need to be provided within the main office building and would take up a small portion of one of the typical office floors. As such, it would be difficult to find an affordable workspace provider who would be able to manage such a space, given the increased service charges that would likely be applied and the fact that it would be separated from the rest of the affordable workspace. In this instance, given the configuration of the building, the principle of a commuted sum for the 2% is considered acceptable. The required commuted sum for the 939 square metres works out at £2,220,350. However, the applicant is proposing to offer the theatre to Southwark Playhouse at £160,000 per year, which would result in a 78% discount on market rent. Additionally, the developer is proposing to fit out the theatre to a specification agreed with Southwark Playhouse. This would result in an additional cost to the developer of approximately £2,660,000, and as such, the developer is proposing that no community sum be payable in this case due to the fit-out costs of the theatre and the significant discount on market rent. Officers consider the provision of a theatre, a community-based theatre in this location to be a significant benefit of the scheme. It would assist in the relocation of a well-regarded local theatre group back to London Bridge. The fit-out of the theatre space in lieu of a community sum is also considered acceptable in this instance, as the costs of the fit-out would far exceed the community sum and would minimise costs to Southwark Playhouse. In design terms, the proposed building would rise to 22 storeys and would be elevated above pavement level by between 11.3 metres and 18.5 metres, which would allow for the creation of a new landscaped public realm beneath the elevated building on Duke Street Hill. This new public realm would provide a new landscaped open space, as well as pedestrian and visual connections from Duke Street Hill through to Tooley Street to the north of the site. The footbridge to London Bridge Station would be demolished and replaced by a new footbridge incorporated into the new development. This footbridge would be located to the eastern end of the site and would be accessed by escalators and lifts. The building would rise to a maximum height of 104.2 metres and would step down westwards to create 4 distinct elements. The above ground part of the building would accommodate the office space as well as a restaurant at level 11. The office space would be accessed from escalators and lifts at the western end of the building that sits adjacent to London Bridge. The theatre, retail units, gym and all back of house functions would be located at lower ground and basement levels, all of which would be accessed from Tooley Street to the north of the site, taking advantage of the difference in levels between Tooley Street and Duke Street Hill. This would allow a new public realm landscaping to be created below the elevated building as well as creating both visual and pedestrian links through the site. As part of the redevelopment plans, a total of 38 new trees would be planted on site, and these would be a mixture of single and multi-stem species. This would be a significant improvement on the current situation and would result in higher value trees with greater canopy cover than at present. The 38 new trees would also contribute to the 981% biodiversity net gain that would be achieved on site, and this is supported by the Council's ecologists. Landscaping and public realm are central to the development's design and are considered to be one of the most significant public benefits of the scheme, with the potential to transform the street level experience of this part of London Bridge. The proposed building, as I mentioned previously, would be elevated by up to 18.5 metres in order to accommodate the public realm under the building. The public realm would comprise 3 character areas, each designed in response to their orientation and how they would be used. Morning Square, which lies to the east, Midday Square, which is the larger part of the public realm and sits centrally, taking advantage of the midday sun, and Evening Square, which lies adjacent to London Bridge and takes advantage of the evening sun. The proposed development dramatically increases green cover across the site through green walling, street trees and intensive planting and green roofs. It's considered that this level of planting would not be possible without raising the building above ground, and an urban greening factor score of 0.3 has been achieved, which is in line with the London plan. The proposed site layout and building footprint is rational and legible. This is reinforced not only in the built form, but in the new central and site-wide public realm. The height, scale and massing of the proposed building has been considered in detail, and is considered to be appropriate and acceptable in the context of the building's position at a point of landmark significance, the height of the building in relation to its surroundings, and the positive contribution it makes to the skyline, the London skyline, and the fact that it would not have significant harmful impacts on LVMF or borough views. The proposed building would comprise 4 distinct stepped elements that would step down westwards. The facades exhibit a clear order, rhythm, texture and depth. The detailed elevational architecture of the building complements its massing strategy and successfully breaks up the mass and slenderises the proportions of the building, particularly in east and west views. Overall, the elevational architecture is considered to be of the highest standards and would be successful in expressing the building's component parts well, giving the building a clear and coherent identity. The materials proposed are considered to be appropriate and high quality and will be secured by condition. In terms of the views, the application is accompanied by a townscape and visual impact assessment which provides a detailed and zoomed views of viewpoints within the London View Management Framework, important borough views and wider townscape views. In these instances, views are considered both in their own right to chart the townscape impact of the proposed design and separately to recognise any harm caused. The impact on all views has been fully considered in the report, which concludes that whilst there would be some harm to views as a result of the tall building, the harm is considered to be less than substantial. It should be noted that Historic England, whilst not objecting to the development, did raise concerns regarding the impact on St Paul's Cathedral, the Tower of London and Southwark Cathedral, and taking these heritage assets in turn. In terms of the Tower of London, the proposal is likely to appear as an incidental feature from the wider tower environment, set behind the more London development and the river frontage buildings, and within the grouping of buildings around the Shard, similar in height to the recently completed Shard Place and the London Bridge Place buildings. The townscape assessment demonstrates that the building would not be visible from the views of the highest significance identified in the Tower of London setting study, the inner ward views around the tower itself, and views from the Royal Mint Court. In this respect, it's considered that the proposal does not give rise to harm to the outstanding universal value of the Tower of London World Heritage Site. In the LVMF view from Parliament Hill, the proposal is located immediately to the left of the dome of St Paul's Cathedral. The proposal will appear in the wider setting area in the backdrop to the strategic landmark. The LVMF notes that in the backdrop to St Paul's is London Bridge cluster, currently visible in this view. It goes on to state that the Shard, with its distinctive shape and high quality materials, provides a strong orientation point to allow the viewer to recognise St Paul's within the wider panorama. The building's stepped form responds deliberately to this specific view, with the first step aligning with the top of the peristyle. Beyond that, and from the second step, the building is angled away from the dome. The zoomed-in view demonstrates that the stepped profile does not interact with the dome above the peristyle, and it will remain below the distant horizon. It's considered that there is some limited harm arising to this view due to the close interaction between the silhouette of the building and the dome and peristyle. Notwithstanding this, the harm is considered to be of the lowest order of less than substantial harm, only apparent in the highly zoomed-in view and not detracting from the viewer's ability to recognise and appreciate St Paul's Cathedral. The GLA has not raised any concerns about the impact of this proposal on the London panorama. And whilst Historic England have not raised a formal objection in this regard, they have expressed concerns. In conclusion, the less than substantial harm arising is considered on balance against the public benefits arising from the proposal to be acceptable. In the view from Kenwood House, the proposal will appear a short distance to the left of the dome of St Paul's Cathedral. Here too, the proposal will be at the edge of the backdrop. The zoomed-in view once again demonstrates that the proposal is lowest closest to the dome and rising away from it and stays well below the distant horizon. Again, the GLA have not raised any concerns about this view, and it is not considered that the development gives rise to any harm to this view. In terms of Southwark Cathedral, officers considered in particular that this view is an experience from within the conservation area and Winchester Walk, one of the main approaches to the cathedral, terminated by a clear view of the cathedral spire. This approach and view contributes positively to the significance of the cathedral and the conservation area. The TVIA demonstrates that visibility of the tower, which would appear behind the cathedral to the left-hand side of the tower, and whilst it fills a space currently open to the sky, it doesn't intrude into the crown of the cathedral spire. The greatest visibility is at the western end of Winchester Walk, and by around midpoint on Winchester Walk, the proposed building disappears from view. As a consequence, bearing in mind the significance of the cathedral and the degree of visibility, it's considered that there is some harm arising and that this harm is of the lowest order of less than substantial. In conclusion, the development is an elegant and highly articulated design that is exemplary in many respects. The stated ambition to establish a highly sustainable development together with a ground plane devoted to publicly accessible landscape is unique and potentially groundbreaking. Added to that, the provision of a high quality and well-established theatre, as well as an important piece of commuter infrastructure, the bridge, will ensure that the development will deliver exemplary design in this location. With regards to transport, the development would be serviced on site from the loading bay, accessed from Tooley Street. Trip generation is not considered to be significant and would not have any noticeable adverse impact on the prevailing vehicle movements on the adjoining roads of the local road network. Likewise, the trip generation associated with the public transport is not anticipated to have any significant adverse impact on the public transport network. The development would provide a total of 815 cycle parking spaces, which slightly exceeds the requirements of the London Plan, and a contribution has been agreed towards enhancing cycle hire provision in the area. A key transport element of the development is that the pedestrian footbridge would be re-provided, ensuring that this key transport link is maintained, allowing the bridge to be improved in terms of its appearance and accessibility. In general amenity terms, the application has been considered for impacts such as daylight and sunlight, air quality, wind impacts and noise, and these have been set out in full in the committee report with the conclusion that there would be no significant adverse impacts. In line with the Council's desire to minimise carbon emissions, the development would achieve a 55% reduction, which exceeds the 35% requirement in policy. An additional carbon offset payment of £619,528 has been secured in order to achieve carbon zero. Following neighbour consultation, 14 letters of objection and 156 letters of support have been received. The letters of objection refer to poor design, excessive height, scale and massing, poor public realm, adverse wind and pollution impacts, and daylight and sunlight impacts. These issues have all been fully addressed in the committee report and concluded that there would be no significant adverse impacts. The letters of support raise issues such as support for the theatre and bringing it back to London Bridge, support for a modern, sustainable, well-designed development, the high standard of the public realm, the new facilities and jobs that would be provided, and the fact that the development would open up views of St Olaf House and improve views of Southwark Cathedral from Tooley Street. The letters of support also consider the development to be high quality in design. Developments of this size and nature have the potential for significant environmental impacts, and therefore an environmental statement has been submitted. The impacts identified in the environmental statement have been assessed and taken into account and should be considered in determining the application. No impacts of a significant scale have been identified which are not capable of being mitigated through detailed design, conditions or through provisions in the Section 106 agreement. The application is considered to be in compliance with the development plan and emerging documents when read as a whole, and it is therefore recommended that planning permission be granted subject to the addendum, conditions, the timely completion of a Section 106 agreement and referral to the Mayor of London.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Councillor Papula.
I wanted to quickly ask, or maybe it's, or maybe it might be commercially sensitive, but on paragraph 67, it stated that the Class C affordable workspace will be offered at a discount, but apparently there's a provision to staircase it from a peppercorn rate to that level over the course of 24 months. I just wanted clarification if it's a smooth transition up or if it's hiked up quite quickly, because we want to ensure that the Playhouse is quite comfortable financially in this new build.
So the discount staircasing that's set out in paragraph 67, that doesn't refer to the Playhouse. The Playhouse, their level of discount will be 78% from the beginning. The staircasing refers to the other incidental parts of the affordable workspace offer, the retail unit and the small part of the office. And it won't be, the staircasing sets out that, you know, from 0 to 6 months it would be 100% discount, so it would be a rent-free period. Then it would move to a 60% discount from months 7 to 13, a 40% discount from months 14 to 22, and then from month 23 onwards, it would be the 25% discount.
Councillor Whittam.
Also on the affordable workspace and the identification of the theatre at Southwark Playhouse, why were they chosen, and would any other theatre groups have been considered, and would they get a chance of bidding for this?
The applicant's probably best in a better position to answer that question. In planning terms, it's not an issue that we can consider. We are considering the land use. The land use in this instance is the theatre. How the operator was identified it's not an issue that planning can take a decision on. Am I right?
Chair, if I can just interject, yes, Terence is correct. Legally, we can only really consider the land use, and here the theatre use is sui generis, so it's up to the applicant to decide who it wants to contract with and have as an end user. Sorry, have as a tenant.
Thank you. Do you want to ask the applicant? We have a further question on that, Councillor Whitton. Ask the applicant. Fine. Okay, that's fine. Any further questions from committee? Councillor Papula.
Yeah, just wanted to ask if we could have more info with regards to the tree arrangement, the long-term tree planning, the tree planting strategy, and ensuring that it's maintained at a decent level. Because in the past, a developer has promised, loads of trees, but it's not been maintained well over a period of time.
Yep, we will have a landscaping strategy secured as part of the Section 106 agreement. There will also be conditions that ensure the trees on site for up to 5 years, and then anything that happens after that, there can be fallback provisions for the council to take money towards new trees. But given that the public realm at the base of this building is such a central part of the development, and it's very important to the development, I'm confident that the applicant will go above and beyond to make sure the planting and the landscaping and the trees at the base of the building thrive, and we'll certainly make sure that that will be provided for in the Section 106.
Councillor Papula.
Could I make a proposal and ask that instead of a base 5 years, that it's longer than that? And the reason why I ask that is because it's such a central area, and we want to ensure that the public landscape is at a very good level, and 5 years does seem quite short. So I would like to propose if the Section 106 would factor that in, and extend it over a longer period of time.
Well, that's within the gift of the committee, subject to the applicant agreeing. We can change the 5-year period and the conditions to a period that members are happy with.
Are you happy to ask that question to the applicants when they come forward? Councillor Papula, thank you. We can take it from there. Thank you. Any further questions? Go on.
I wanted to ask as well, what do you mean in the report in terms of in terms of long-term and short-term, in terms of the cycle space provided? What do you mean by long-term and short-term stays?
So short-term cycle parking is usually taken by people who are parking their bike quickly to go into a shop and buy a sandwich or something, or perhaps drop something off. Long stay is people who cycle to work, and their bike will be parked there for the course of the day while they're at work. So they have to, it's just on a time basis and how they're used.
So there's no significant design change or where they'll be located?
So short stay spaces tend to be located on street. They tend to be located in public realm because that's where it's most convenient for them to be used, and they usually take the form of Sheffield stands, which is what will happen in this case. Long stay cycle parking tends to be indoors, secure, covered because of the nature of its use.
I've got a couple of questions. First of all, it was about the pedestrian route from the station to the bridge, because obviously it's a very well used route, certainly at sort of peak hours. So just really to understand how that will work, and to make sure that it's a route that enables sort of or doesn't block up the current sort of pedestrian flow of people from the station to the bridge.
No, the applicant has undertaken research into this. The benefit of the new public footway, the new bridge, is that it removes the ramp. It provides lifts and escalators, so it's more accessible, and it will be located back from the footway on Duke Street Hill, but you you previously raised a very important point, and that is at the base of the escalators there appears to be a tree located, and we'll have the applicant amend that as part of the landscape strategy to make sure that pedestrian movement isn't impeded.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you. I am slightly concerned about the cycle parking spaces issue. I note that you are reducing the amount of on-street parking with 34 Sheffield stands currently available, but there only being 18 spaces, so that's as being 9 Sheffield stands in the public realm, which I think, given the increase in the amount of cycling that's happening throughout Southwark, and especially in this location, it is a concern. So I'm interested to find out what the access to the automated cycle store will be. I'm also keen, and this is a relevant local issue, given that the Better Bankside bid has been encouraging delivery by cargo bikes, whether there'll be cycling parking on street for non-standard bikes, the sort of bicycles used by disabled people, family bicycles, and cargo bicycles to be used by local businesses, for which a below ground or above ground automated cycle store might not be sufficient, and removing Sheffield stands on the street level might also be difficult.
So there will be 18 Sheffield stands on street. There will be an additional 68 spaces provided within the automated cycle store, which will be free to use. In terms of non-standard cycle spaces within the public realm, again, that's something that we can add to the application. We can look at numbers, we can look at location, but the overall provision at street level was considered acceptable. But yet they're important points, and we can revisit the cycle parking. We can make it a conditioned requirement or a requirement in the legal agreement to provide different types of spaces for different users.
I'm still keen to hear more about the automated cycle parking. How will that work?
The applicant will have more information on how the automated cycle parking works. Let me just flick through the report. I have put out some information in the report on how it will be used.
I can wait to talk to the applicant if that's better.
Yeah, or I can come back to you once I find it in the report.
Yes, we've got the opportunity to ask the applicant, and you can come back if that's not properly answered there to the officer. One further question or comments I wanted to make. I noticed from the addendum report we've had a representation about commemorating Peter of Colchurch, and just wondered if you could make some further comments on that, because I know that the member of the public who raised the issue was in the audience today.
So we had a representation regarding the possibility of commemorating is it Richard of Colchurch or Peter of Colchurch, the namesake of the building. We have approached the applicant about that. The applicant is happy to incorporate a plaque commemorating this, or potentially naming one of the 3 open spaces in the development after them. The other issue that was raised was an application dating from 1997, which gave permission to a plaque. But it's not clear from my site visit anyway that the permission was ever implemented. I can't see anything that resembles a plaque. And as you know, it grants permission, but it doesn't compel anybody to carry it out. And because it was in 1997, there's not a huge amount of information to go on. But the applicant is absolutely willing to commemorate and to provide either a plaque or information in the public realm.
Thank you. For people who don't know, and I must admit I didn't know until I saw the request from a member of the public, Peter of Colchurch was the person who arranged for the medieval London Bridge to be built. So it's an important part of this borough's history, or the famous medieval bridge, because I understand there were a number, but the famous one with all the buildings on it and the spikes of traitors' heads and things was Peter de Colchurch that set about building that.
As a completely irrelevant point of interest, my father was actually responsible for the design of the superstructure of the current London Bridge.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little early to commemorate him, I'm afraid, Councillor Leeming, but maybe in the future. Thank you. If we've not got any further comments or questions on that, we'll move over to any objectors that are in the audience. So we've not heard from any beforehand, but if there are any, if you'd like to indicate. I can't see any indication. So in that case, if we can move forward with the applicants and the applicants' agents. So I understand we have Steve Riddle from Bridge Park Estates. Do you want to come forward to the front table? Thank you. You can? Yes, please. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, and after you've introduced yourself, you've got 3 minutes to present, just so that you know how to use it. It's the right-hand button on the handset will enable you to speak. So, yeah, if you can introduce yourselves, and then I'll give you 3 minutes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, chair and officers. I'm Steve Riddell. I'm from CIT. We're the developers of the project.
Good evening, my name's Ken Hogg from the Architects Foster and Partners.
Good evening, David Shields from DP9. We are the agents.
Okay. CIT have a strong track record in Southwark, including More London, South Bank Tower, and most recently Vinegar Yard, where we are partnering with Guy's and St Thomas's to support the health and well-being of local residents. We are proud of this involvement and believe Colchurch House will add to this with a real and positive legacy. You'll know the site. It was built in the 60s and it's well past its economic life. Colchurch House has been partially occupied and relatively unloved since 2013. I had a fun fact here about Peter de Colchurch, but that's already been done. So, but and just for the record, we're absolutely fine with putting acknowledging his historic input to the site. When we got involved in 2019, our starting point was to appoint Foster and Partners as architects. We identified that this is a really important site with the potential to transform the northern gateway to London Bridge. It therefore demands an exemplary architecture and the kind of innovative thinking that Foster's can bring. Our first and ongoing priority is to focus on sustainability. We set a net zero carbon brief for our building from the start, tapping Foster's success with the Bloomberg building in the city, identifying sustainability as a fundamental requirement well before any of our competitors were doing that, back in 2019, as you'll recall. I'm sure you see a lot of zero carbon schemes now, though. This climate-conscious approach began with thinking about the retention and reuse of the existing building. Our analysis shows that demolition and new build delivers an overall carbon reduction, while meeting the council's aspiration to intensively develop near a key transport node. So we're proud to say that Colchurch House will be a truly net zero carbon building. The scheme targets various things which have been covered by the officer. Carbon dioxide savings at 55% relative to standard UK buildings. That's in excess of what's normally required. Compliance with the RBA 2030 climate challenge and the Paris carbon reductions to limit global temperatures to less than 1.5 degrees. So again, we go far in excess of the normal requirement there. 75% savings of operational energy. So it's 75% cheaper to run as a building in itself. An outstanding BREEAM rating and a platinum well rating. Foster's and our energy consultant Sweco are here tonight to talk more about that if you wish to ask questions about that later. The second big move Foster's made was to lift the building into the air. So it floats a full 5 stories above the ground. This makes space for a new public park, which is across 85% of the site. The park will be a green oasis with extensive planting, carefully designed to work with the urban location, and will host a community-led programme of activity throughout the year. The third move was made to bring Southwark Playhouse into the scheme following discussions with the council, bringing them back to the original location at London Bridge. We are creating a £10 million purpose-built venue for them, provided a genuinely affordable rent for the lifetime of the theatre. We're equally excited about the new community outreach and schools programmes that they will bring. They're also here tonight, at the back, if you want to ask them more questions as well about their plans. Fourth, we are focused on creating good work opportunities. Colchurch House brings over 3,000 permanent jobs to the borough, with 500 during construction. More importantly, working with good people, over 400 will be for local people, including 25 construction apprenticeships. We have consulted extensively with the local community and brought together the other landowners around us to ensure that our plans are a catalyst for wider improvements in the locality. And I'm happy to say that we found strong support for our scheme. We really want this to get started on this exciting development, and we hope that you will support our proposals. And thank you again, and of course we have quite a few of our team members here to answer more questions if you have them. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicants? Councillor Papula.
I wanted to quickly find out if you were interested or open to extending the tree plant scheme.
Sorry, can you just confirm what you're asking for? It's for a longer maintenance period, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're perfectly happy with that. I mean, I understand, I've been doing this for 30 years, and trees can be a real headache, and they can just die, and we're well used to those sorts of provisions. And yes, we'd be happy to extend that. I'm not sure what would be an acceptable period, but if it's 5 years and it has to be extended by a couple more, I'm sure we could come to an arrangement.
Councillor Leeming.
First an observation and then a question. In my day job, I'm a consultant in the cultural sector, and one of the things I've worked on is regeneration issues involving cultural facilities. So to see your proposal for Southwark Playhouse is fantastic. I mean, I'm genuinely excited by that. So thank you for that. But the question I'm going to ask you is the same one I asked the officer just now. I am concerned about the provision of on-street bicycle parking, especially provision for non-standard or developing larger than usual bikes, which might be used either by businesses or families or disabled people. So I'd be interested in A, whether you can provide more on-street bicycle parking, or B, how the automated system will work.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for your support for the theatre. Yeah, it's an interesting question. The cycle stacking silo is new technology for the UK, but it's quite old technology in Europe and in Japan. It's been around for quite a while. And when we showed it to the cycle pressure group from the GLA, they were quite excited to have one in the UK, because you would not believe the fun and games I've had trying to find a supplier who's actually prepared to do one in the UK. And I think that's the reason why they haven't happened so far. And the big benefit of them is that you can take the clutter of cycle storage off the public realm and put it somewhere where it's more controlled and safer and and more secure. So it has a huge benefit in that respect. But of course, not everybody can use a cycle stacker, and that's why we have some spaces at grade. I think, as Terence said, we've tried to find the balance. But if there's a desire to increase, to tip that balance to more on-grade spaces, we can look at that. It just means it will have less other amenities in the landscape. But we can definitely work on that as a condition, I would have thought. And then the operation, we have a loading bay, an off-site loading bay, at the very western end of the site at Tildy Street level, next to the old London Bridge. And there's loading bays in there, and that's where the cargo cycles would load and unload and be operated from. So I think we can deal with them quite easily. The way the cycle storage system works, we would have one of the kiosk operators would use to support it for technical issues that users might have, and then generally it's done through an app. So you'd have it's just like with a Boris bike. You register for the app that allows you to park the bike. That means that whoever's running the facility can track down those people if there's a problem, or they don't retrieve their bike after a certain period of time or whatever. And then the maintenance of the units is done by the same people who maintain lifts. So they have call-out periods and the like, which are very strictly controlled, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a well-trodden path on how to make these things work. It's been done in Europe a lot. We're very excited to do one of the first ones in the UK. We really want to do it, so we're looking forward to it as well. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I mean, I'm actually almost excited by that as a cycle parking nerd as I am by the theatre. So I'm familiar with how they work in Holland and in Japan. So yeah, that's good news. Thank you.
Councillor Whittam.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a Jeremiah, but with best will in the world and the best laid plans of mice and men don't always come to fruition. So if the theatre doesn't work out with the Southwark Playhouse, what are your contingency plans for that space, given that it's part of the affordable workspace.
Thank you, Councillor. We got involved with Southwark Playhouse right at the start, and we wanted to design a facility for them that was integrated into our design. So that, because a theatre is a very particular thing, obviously. And Southwark Playhouse were very pleased about it as well, because they've never had that experience either. So they've been next to Foster's through the design process from 3 years ago to design this theatre to their requirements. And you make a good point. I mean, what happens if they can't make the model work and they can't pay the rent? And the rent obviously is extremely low. It's about £6 a foot. I think it works out, or £8 a foot on the net. And so it's an extremely, and it's capped. It's indexed according to RPI, but at a very slow rate, not like the other space. And that number on the rent was agreed after quite a lot of negotiation with Southwark Playhouse to make sure it was sustainable for them. So it's not a profit-making thing for us at all. It's very much a subsidised public benefit from our point of view. But of course, we love having them there because it gives the scheme great kudos as well in the borough. If Southwark Playhouse can't fulfil their obligations and take up the lease, then we'd have to look at other operators who might want to do it, because it is a fantastic theatre and it's been designed specifically around what they want. If we can't find anyone to do that, then you'll probably notice from the sections that you saw on the screen, it's a big volume of space in the bottom of the building, and its square footage, its floor area, complies with the affordable workspace ratios that we have to achieve. But if you added more floors in, you'd actually get an increase in area, and that would be the way you wouldn't fit it out as a theatre. You'd convert it into an office space and let it on the normal affordable workspace provisions. And I imagine if that's a concern, Terence would put that in as a condition, or a condition in the 106 to make that as a plan B to deal with that scenario.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of totally unrelated questions. So just to go back to the cycle storage, which does sound really interesting. Is it free to use for anyone? So the question is, does it cost anything? And can anyone access it, or do they need to be visiting something on site specifically to be able to use it? And then, it's right to do two questions, yeah. You started by introducing a very clear climate change strategy for the site and how you'd approached it. And actually, it would just be really interesting to hear more about how you're achieving those targets and those objectives. So if there was, if you could help bring that to life, that'd be really helpful, because it's always helpful for a committee to learn how the questions to ask others.
Is it free to use? We've always assumed it's going to be free to use, and that will be paid for out of the service charge to manage the estate. And it would be an app-based mechanism, so anyone can use it who can use an iPhone or a smartphone, would be the idea. You don't have to be coming to the building. You have to be doing. I think the only headache we might have is long-term people who are parking their bikes at the station. But the data that would come out of the app would give you the ability to control that. So if we had a recidivist, we could stop them being able to park. If you see what I mean, because it's an app-based system. So I think it's actually a lot easier to manage than a traditional outdoor Sheffield stand setup. And your question about the green agenda and how we're actually achieving it, I've got my architect here and my carbon man at the back somewhere, Kartik. But so I'm going to, because it's a huge topic and you could talk about it a long time. But Ken, do you want to have a crack at it?
If I could start just in terms of when we started working with CIT, it was the agenda in terms of the design to not only actually create a project which was truly net zero, but a project which, in terms of environmental sustainability, incorporated green space, the park, and so on. So I think in terms of some of the itemised sustainable items, I'll just outline a few of them, and then perhaps Kartik can actually go into more detail if you're interested. But there's a number of sustainable issues that we tackled with this design, one of which is natural ventilation for the office floors. And that's incredibly important. And natural ventilation with a facade which is tuned to the way that the sun moves around the project. So it minimises solar gain and maximises natural ventilation with an internal environment which improves well-being. I think everybody recognises an air-conditioned office building. This is completely different, and it's the future actually in terms of natural ventilation. It's much better for people. That's enhanced by actually the way that the services work. So you don't have huge amounts of air conditioning plant. We have borehole cooling, which actually goes hundreds of meters into actually the ground to actually bring conditioned air into the building, which is very natural. We also actually have photovoltaic cells all over the facade as well. Discrete, and that produces energy for the whole building. Add on to that you have green spaces which step up on top of each element of the project. Then you've got accessibility, even at the upper levels, from each floor level. On the east and west facades, there are winter gardens that can open up during the summer, close up during winter. So therefore, every floor space has access to green, naturally ventilated space. We think it's a future model for the workplace, and added that to the incorporation of the cultural aspects of the project, the new park, we think it's an incredible kind of contribution, and we are very excited, the whole team are very excited to bring this to Southwark. Perhaps Kartik can actually add just a bit more in terms of the environmental aspects, just a bit more detail.
Hi everyone, I hope you can hear me, so just give me a shout. So, hi, I'm Kartik from Swedish consultancy. So as just to add on what Ken said, we're looking at two components of carbon here. The one is the embodied carbon, where we're utilizing green material right from the outset, and the other one is the operation. Operation at the moment is your electricity use. Essentially, there's going to be no gas whatsoever within the building, so it's all electric, which will be produced by renewables in the future, plus green certification from day one. So you have green electricity coming into building. High efficiency building services system, as Ken said, not using ground source heat pump, which are very, very efficient. So when you compare to any standard stock of UK office building, including probably this one, you're looking at 75% decrease in energy consumption. So as Ken alluded earlier, it is a model for the future, without any doubt. Okay. Thanks, Kartik.
Thank you. Okay. Any further questions for the applicants? Councillor King?
Yeah, sorry, just one more quick question, which might not have a quick answer. The planting is really impressive, and when you're looking at the design, it's visually, like looking through the plans, it's visually very impressive in terms of size and scale. I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about its value in terms of biodiversity.
I have another colleague here, or another consultant here from Foster's Landscaping, Nick. He will give you. Do you want to sit down there?
Do you want to sit down? Councillor, no, I'm fine. Thank you very much for the question. The planting itself is selected to be representative of a natural environment that would occur here. It's very much attuned to the ecology of the site, the ecology of the region. The planting itself is selected to be appropriate to the conditions that we are creating in this particular space. At Foster's, we're very keen on making sure we have a robust planting proposal. So we start from the soil, we build everything up, we look at the soil depth, we look at the soil volumes, we look at the mycelium in which they engage, and the planting itself is a very robust proposal as it is. Thinking about the species selection and the conditions that are there, obviously we have the wind, we have the sunlight, we have all of those other elements that are part of the urban realm that we consider when we're thinking about the planting. So it's very much attuned to the ecology of this space and therefore improves upon it rather than trying to import an ecology that doesn't naturally exist here. I hope that answers the question.
One final one, Councillor.
And it's definitely a follow-on rather than a new issue.
I can talk gardens all day.
And just because it would be really interesting, how much consideration has been given to climate change when it comes to the landscaping. So I suppose the bit that I'm very conscious of is the condition of green spaces in the borough following the hottest summer we've ever known, and whether that is something that's already factored in the landscaping strategy, in the sense that the planting will thrive, because I'm just conscious that loops into the issues around how long we condition the management of trees.
Sorry, it was long. So in terms of the way that the planting is proposed at the moment, it's proposed to meet with conditions that we have and an ever-changing condition. We have a particular site that has a certain amount of more shade, it has a certain amount of ventilation through it, so it is not necessarily as adversely affected by climate change as an open site might be. Of course, when we're planning this, it's not just about the implementation on day one, it's about the management, and we've put a very clear management brief together that talks about how this will evolve, how planting will be managed to evolve in that way. So it's a horticultural ongoing journey, and planting will will change inevitably. Interestingly, in horticultural terms, we've been working with a nursery who supplies a lot of the plants for Chelsea Flower Show, a very high-end horticultural kind of led nursery. During this summer, they've been putting plants under open-sided barns, to reduce the water demand that they're requiring, to allow those kind of plants to survive a little bit longer. So actually, we're starting to recreate things that commercial nurseries are doing as well. So that's how we know that things are going to start, or how we're testing things to see how well they grow and how we can improve upon that. But it's a very valid thing.
Councillor Whittam.
Just to carry on with the ecology, thinking of the fauna rather than the flora, have you looked at the possibility of green links along the Thames, and what sort of fauna would be attracted to this site?
Indeed, I'm not an ecologist. We do have an ecologist, so I can't speak on behalf of our ecologist. But yeah, the site is seen as an island site. It's seen as an island skip to exactly as you allude to the other sites along the Thames, and has been specifically targeted to suit the ecology that is there. So the riverside ecology, the other small sort of tree sites that you see. There's a lot of sort of single trees that you see around Southwark, and smaller kind of green spaces. In terms of targeted to a very specific ecology, there is nothing that's sort of noted as being very specific on site at the moment. It doesn't exist. So what we're putting together is something that's robustly able to offer an ecology to those surrounding sites, and then again, as a watching brief, we will develop that site to provide that sort of diversity, because the biophilia from seeing the kind of movements of insects and butterflies and things like that within the site is very much part of the overall experience that we're trying to achieve.
I think to answer Councillor King's question as well, the net biodiversity gain is 800 to 900% from existing. So we are really ramping it up.
I wanted to ask a question which was following on from my earlier one to officers about the heritage value of the site and the historic importance of the site. So it's not. Thank you very much. This is obviously a very important historic site within the borough. Southwark started at the bridge, and there's been a number of different bridges, some of whose footprint might have crossed across part of this site. So it was really just to see whether you were open to suggestions to look at how that might be commemorated or marked, perhaps in terms of the public realm space around the outside of the site.
Yeah, we're going to have a face-off with Peter de Colchurch, because some of the ideas we've had is to name the Western Square in relation to London Bridge itself, the current London Bridge, and the middle square to relate to the old London Bridge, which actually landed just about there. And then the Eastern Square was just about St Olave's, we thought would make a good... So we've had some ideas about how we might name squares, but we would probably expect that to be part of a community engagement program that we would, we're very happy to, work that out as we go along. So we're not, we love the idea of the morning, daytime and evening squares, because that's how the sun's going to work. And actually walking down here tonight, I took a couple of photos because there was people sitting in front of our building in the sun, coming in at an angle into our space, and I was imagining how that space would be if we'd finished our building by now. It'd be fantastic. So I think it's very important that whatever we choose to call those stairs, follows that theme, but can definitely be done with a community engagement program.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Any further questions for the applicants? In that case, thank you very much for your time and your answers. So if you could return to the chairs behind, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Do we have any supporters who live within 100 metres of the site present in the meeting? We do not. Do we have any ward councillors for London Bridge and West Bermondsey ward in the room that wish to speak? I can't see any unless they're hiding at the back. No, I don't believe we do. So that brings us back to any further questions members of the committee have for officers. Councillor Whittam.
Can I just check with Terence whether the Plan B that was mentioned is covered in the S106 agreement?
I think it is, because we have an affordable workspace strategy. But to avoid any doubt, I will add a specific provision to the drafting that requires the Plan B that we've discussed this evening.
Councillor Papula.
I wanted to ask, so under paragraph 68, it states here that no more than 50% of the market rate floor space can be occupied until the affordable workspace has been fitted out, ready for occupation. Who confirms that? Is it the council? Is it Playhouse? Is it the developer? So who confirms that? So if the developer feels like it's up to standards for occupation, but Playhouse don't agree, is there a mechanism in the 106 which would address that?
The developer has to notify the council when they implement the development. There's also a requirement typical in Section 106 agreements where the developer's required to notify the council in advance of first occupation. And at that point, we would then have information from the developer in terms of the programme of occupation. So we would be able to look and generally be comfortable about when 50% occupation is being achieved, and officers can check that.
So I don't believe that addressed my question in the fact that if Playhouse, states that it's not ready for occupation, but the developer feels like it is, what's the mechanism? What's the mechanism to clarify as to whether it is quote unquote fitted out, ready for occupation?
Officers would check it. It would become a planning enforcement issue at that stage.
Any further questions for officers? Any comments that members of the committee would like to make on this application?
Do we need to agree the extension of the... Sorry, Chair. Do we need to agree the extension of the tree statutory management?
I think that's helpful. What figure are we considering?
I thought about 10 years starting from PC.
I don't know if the applicants are, is that something you would be content with if you want to come forward very quickly?
Game of poker. So just so I'm clear, you're asking us to keep an obligation to replace any tree that dies for up to 10 years after PC. Yeah, and I think that's probably doable. I mean, I was expecting about 7 years, to be honest, because, don't forget, we will finish the scheme, we'll have it occupied, we'll have a maintenance company that runs the estate for us, and their job is to maintain the landscape. But yeah, we'd want to keep all the big trees as well. So I guess I think I can't see a problem with that. So yeah, okay, you win the poker game. We'll go for that.
Well done, Reggie.
If you'd said 20, I would have had a problem with that.
Okay, thank you for that, thank you. Okay, so with that amendment, and you'll have also seen in the addendum, there is a further condition at paragraph 12 about a compliance condition about building heights, but just to note that. But if there aren't any further comments, I would like to...
Chair, can I just confirm all the changes that members have spoken about this evening? So in terms of the 106 changes, we've got the affordable workspace in the alternative. We've got the naming of squares, which was also mentioned, and I think that would probably be secured as a Section 106 obligation. So attempts to basically just discuss with the local community. And the third thing, which was just mentioned, was the tree maintenance of 7 years. So those are the three section... 10, sorry. 10 years. And the second point... Sorry, no. The condition that was mentioned was the placement of the cycle storages. So I think, Councillor Leeming, you said you wanted the applicant to look a little bit more about where potentially the need was.
Yes.
So that's an amendment for the condition. So we've got 3 Section 106 changes and 1 condition change. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with those changes, can I read the recommendation that we have before us? So I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraphs 1 to 6 of the report, which are set out on pages 105 to 106 of the main agenda pack. That planning permission be granted subject to conditions, including those we've just discussed, referral to the Mayor of London and the applicant entering into an appropriate legal agreement. And secondly, that environmental information be taken into account as required by Regulation 26 of the Town and Country Planning, brackets environmental impact assessments, close brackets regulations 2017 as amended. That the Planning Committee, in making their decision, has due regard to the potential equalities impacts that are outlined in this report, and that following the issue of planning permission, the Director of Planning and Growth writes the Secretary of State notifying them of the decision pursuant of Regulation 31A of the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2017, and that following the planning permission, the Director of Planning and Growth place a statement on the statutory register pursuant of Regulation 28(1) of the TCP EIA Regulations 2017, which contains the information required by Regulations 28 and for the purposes of Regulation 28(1)H, being the main reasons and considerations on which the Planning Committee's decision was based, shall be set out in the report, and that in the event the requirements of one are not met by the 31st December 2022, that the Director of Planning and Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission, if appropriate, for the reasons set out in paragraph 320 of this report. So that's the officer recommendation. Is there anybody here willing to propose that recommendation? Councillor Leeming has proposed. Anybody wishing to second the recommendation? That looked like Councillor Papula. I think they got there just first. So I'm going to take people in order to see how you wish to vote on this item. Councillor Whittam.
For, Chair.
Councillor King.
For, Chair.
Councillor Leeming.
For, Chair.
Councillor Papula.
For, Chair.
Councillor Roberts.
For.
Councillor Soanes.
For, Chair.
And I'm Councillor Livingstone, and I'm also voting for this motion. So the motion is carried. The planning permission is granted. Thank you. We'll take a comfort break of 5 minutes, which will enable people to leave the room and do whatever else they need to do. Thank you, and thank you everybody for waiting. So we're now moving on to item 7.2 on the agenda, which is 35 to 39 Parkhouse Street, London SE5 7TQ, which is on pages 250 to 355 of the main agenda pack, and also on pages 3 to 5 of the addendum report. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Terence to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. Could you? Thanks. Okay, so located on the north side of Parkhouse Street on the southern boundary of Burgess Park, the application site measures approximately 0.24 hectares and currently comprises a single-storey brick-built warehouse building and two 1950s dwellings that have been converted to 4 flats. The site is currently occupied by Worldwide Limited, a wholesale brewery, and prior to that it was occupied for quite a long time by a packaging company, J. Hunnocks and Sons. Existing vehicular and pedestrian access to the proposed development site is via Parkhouse Street, which borders the site to the south and forms a loop between Southampton Way and Wells Way. The site is in a predominantly industrial area, although there are residential uses at 1 to 13 and 37 to 39 Parkhouse Street. On this slide, actually, it's just helpful to note that the building just to the south is the Joseph Holmes site, and the building that occupies the inside of the curve of Parkhouse Street is the Burgess Business Park site. Both of those sites have permission for redevelopment for mixed-use schemes, including housing. When originally submitted, the proposed development sought consent for a 10-storey building up to 35.5 metres in height, with 100 build-to-rent homes and 1,323 square metres of commercial floor space. But following concerns raised as part of the initial consultation process, including feedback from officers and a requirement to work collaboratively with the adjacent landowner, the applicant sought to make significant revisions to the proposed development. Following initial consultation on the originally submitted scheme, a total of 69 representations were received from neighbours and local groups, including Wellsway Triangle Residents Association and Friends of Burgess Park, objecting to the proposed development. 2 representations offering support for the development were received. The main points of the objection related to amenity impacts, including impacts on the adjacent nature area, design issues such as the building being excessively tall, and a poor standard of design and transport impacts. So following this consultation exercise, the applicant engaged with officers and the adjacent landowners in order to address wider and shared objectives in order to deliver a coordinated approach to development in the area. As a result of this engagement, the applicant fully revised the scheme, reducing the number of homes and the building height, as well as following a new architectural approach and an amended design. Again, this slide is helpful because it just outlines where the adjacent sites are. The large area outlined in yellow off to the right, as you'll all be aware, is the Aylesbury regeneration. The application sites in blue, and the large area to the left of the application site is the Burgess Business Park site, or as it's known as Camberwell Union now. As a result of the proposed amendments, a further statutory consultation was undertaken by the Council, in addition to the consultation undertaken locally by the applicant. Following the Council's reconsultation, a total of 9 objections and 1 representation of support have been made. The response offering support states simply that they're supportive of the development. The objections received don't raise anything new that hasn't already been considered in full in the report. So the amended scheme seeks permission for the demolition of all the buildings on the site and redevelopment to provide a 9-storey building, subject to the caveat that I've set out in the addendum about why we're referring to it as 9 storeys. So it seeks to redevelop the site to provide a 9-storey building with a maximum height of 27.23 metres above ground. The building would be arranged in an H formation and the development would provide 1,306 square metres of Class E commercial floor space on the ground floor and mezzanine level, and the upper floors would accommodate 85 new dwellings. Thanks. Vehicular access would remain from Parkhouse Street to a yard on the western flank of the site. This would enable servicing to be undertaken off-street and would also provide 3 accessible car parking spaces, whilst the 2 residential cores could be accessed from this yard. The principal residential access is actually from Parkhouse Street itself, just to the left there, and it provides access not only to the residential cores but to the cycle parking. In land use terms, the proposed development would re-provide the existing employment space with a small increase of 2 square metres, and this meets the requirement of the site allocation and planning policy in terms of the re-provision of employment floor space. The proposed employment space would be good quality and would be split between 3 units, making them more attractive to small business owners. All of the units would benefit from level access at street level, and as such don't require extensive loading and unloading facilities or goods lifts. 10% of the employment floor space would be secured as an affordable workspace and would remain as such for 30 years with a 25% discount on market rent levels. This would be secured in the legal agreement alongside other relevant terms. In terms of housing, the development would provide 85 new homes with a policy compliant unit mix and all homes meeting the space standards set out in the SPD. Affordable housing would be provided at 40% with a policy compliant split between social rented and intermediate homes. 10% of homes would be suitable for wheelchair users in line with Southwark Plan requirements. All homes have been designed to be tenure blind, and the quality of accommodation can be described as exemplary. Whilst not every unit would comply with all of the exemplary criteria, the Mayor's Housing SPG advises that a failure to meet one standard would not necessarily lead to a failure to comply with the London Plan. All of the units would meet the minimum floor space requirements, and many would significantly exceed them. All of the wheelchair accessible units would meet the larger unit sizes, and a significant majority of the units would be dual aspect. I think it's at 86%. All of the units would comply with the BRE guidance in terms of average daylight factor and would be well lit. All of the units would also benefit from private amenity space, and the play space for the 0 to 11 age group would be fully provided on site. Given that the site is immediately adjacent to Burgess Park, the applicant is proposing that the 12 plus age group use the facilities designed for their age group within the park. Given the proximity of the site to the park and the site-specific circumstances that prevent the 12 plus age group from being accommodated on site, this proposal is considered acceptable, subject to the provision of £10,350 towards enhanced play facilities within Burgess Park. In terms of private amenity space, all units will benefit from balconies ranging from 6 square metres to 44 square metres. All 3-bedroom family units would benefit from a balcony of at least 10 square metres and as such would comply with the SPD. Where 1 and 2 bedroom units do not benefit from a 10 square metre balcony, the shortfall should be added to the communal amenity space requirement of 50 square metres. As such, the shortfall of 172 square metres from the 1 and 2 bedroom balconies and the 50 square metre communal amenity space is such that 222 square metres should be provided. Now, given the site-specific circumstances, including the requirement to re-provide the commercial floor space, as well as limiting the height of the proposed building, it's not been possible to provide the communal amenity space shortfall in addition to the play space. Officers have therefore taken the view that the first floor roof terrace is suitable as a play space, and whilst it can also be used as an amenity space, officers consider that a charge should be applied in line with the Section 106 and SIL SPD at £205 per square metres of shortfall for the private amenity space, and this would equate to £43,460 contribution, and this would be secured as part of the Section 106 agreement and again would be used to provide enhancements to Burgess Park. The proposal has been arranged on 3 urban design principles. to reinforce the Parkhouse Street frontage and offer natural surveillance and active frontages onto the street, to respect the Burgess Park edge setting back from the mature planted nature area at the southern edge of the park, and the courtyard design of the recently consented neighbouring scheme at 25 to 33 Parkhouse Street, also known as the Joseph Holmes site. As I said previously, the design is arranged in an H shape with one flank fronting onto Parkhouse Street and the other onto Burgess Park, in the link defining the two courtyards. One courtyard to the west is set at ground level and marries up with a similar sized courtyard on the neighbouring plot. That's also the courtyard from which the servicing would take place, and where the 3 accessible car parking spaces are located and where the commercial units would be accessed from. The eastern courtyard is at podium level, and as I've mentioned previously, it's been designed as a communal garden and would be the 0 to 11 play space. The development has a generously sized commercial base, providing high quality business space. And above that, the blocks rise to a shoulder height of 6 stories with a setback 1.5 to 2 story high attic. The blocks are clad in brick up to the shoulder with generous overhanging balconies, and the attic story is clad in dark grey metal, forming gable roofs that emulate the industrial heritage of the area. Whilst the block is urban in character on Parkhouse Street with a confident geometrical appearance, the wing facing onto Burgess Park is staggered to break down its massing and introduce a measure of dual aspect. It would be set back 5 metres from the park edge and would appear behind a retained gable warehouse wall located at the park edge, thereby minimising any impacts on the nature area. The proposed height is appropriate and relates well to its surroundings, including the recently consented developments. The plot doesn't include a tall building and takes its cue from the setting of the spire of the former St George's Church. It does this by defining a cone of vision from the approaching path that ensures the church spire is not interrupted by the building. And further on in the presentation, we have a view from the park. So you can see the church spire and you can see the taller development on the Joseph Holmes site, and you can just see the black roof of the top 1.5 story of the proposed Parkhouse Street scheme. If you could scroll back through, Depeche, just to the contextual elevations. Again, these elevations, they show the difference in scale between the proposal on this site and off to the left, the taller buildings that were approved as part of the Joseph Holmes site, and kind of faded out to the back, you can see the taller elements that form part of the Burgess Business Park application, which now has permission. In conclusion, the scheme has been carefully crafted as in a direct response to its context and its urban setting. It's highly articulated and set at a scale and massing that doesn't appear overly dominant. It reinforces the street edge appropriately on Parkhouse Street and will provide a very high quality of design. In terms of neighbouring amenity, the proposed development would have no significant adverse impacts on any neighbouring existing residential neighbours in terms of loss of outlook, loss of privacy, or a detrimental reduction in the availability of daylight and sunlight. In fact, there are very limited impacts on daylight and sunlight at all. The immediately adjacent buildings are industrial buildings, and their continued use for industrial purposes would not be compromised by the proposal. And as I mentioned previously, planning consent has been granted on 3 of the 4 adjacent sites for employment and residential uses. Officers don't consider that the proposed development would compromise the ability to provide high quality residential accommodation on these sites, and there would be no conflict of use detrimental to commercial operations. The proposed energy strategy would achieve an on-site reduction in carbon emissions of 49% beyond the building regs, and that significantly exceeds the 35% in the London plan. It would achieve a 14% reduction under the B-Lean stage for residential uses and 24% for the non-residential uses, also exceeding the 10% and 15% requirements set out in the London plan. Whilst it wouldn't meet the Southwark plan policy of 100% on-site savings, there's no scope to provide further photovoltaic panels on the building. A financial contribution of £151,032 should be secured in the Section 106 agreement in order to achieve carbon zero status for the development. In transport terms, the site would be serviced on site, and as such there would be very limited impact on the highway, which would also benefit from pavement widening. Trip generation associated with the development is such that it wouldn't have any noticeable adverse traffic impact on the surrounding roads. The applicant's consultants have projected that the development would create an estimated 33 two-way public transport trips in the morning or evening peak hours, and that's deemed reasonable. It's considered that the applicant should make a contribution of £77,273 to bus improvements in the area, and again this should be secured in the Section 106 agreement. The development would be car-free with the exception of the 3 accessible parking bays which are referred to previously, and they would all have electric vehicle charging facilities. Cycle parking would meet both London and Southwark Plan standards. Ecological impacts upon the adjoining nature area have been carefully considered through an independent ecological assessment which considers cumulative construction impacts, overshadowing, increased recreational pressure and light spillage. With regard to overshadowing, the independent report concluded that the area of woodland which would experience increased shadowing is broadly the area which supports the lowest understory diversity. And whilst some disturbance upon the woodland is therefore possible, it's not considered likely that this would be to any significant degree, nor would it impact birds, bats or invertebrates. The greatest overshadowing impact is predicted for the winter months when trees and most flora are dormant. The woodland understory is not of sufficient diversity or structure for the additional shadowing to be considered significant in ecological terms. It's therefore concluded that any impact would not be significant. To mitigate increased use of the park, the report suggests that the developments coming forward provide an opportunity for the creation of small strategic habitat banks in the park. And the developments adjoining the park are expected to fund this. This could be in the form of new meadow planting, bird or bat boxes, insect hotels and stag beetle loggeries. To this end, and in consultation with the Council's Ecology Officer, a contribution of £40,770 should be secured through the Section 106 agreement towards habitat creation in Burgess Park. And following that mitigation and through conditions and planning obligations, it's concluded that the proposal, like those on the neighbouring sites, could deliver some biodiversity enhancements to Burgess Park. The issues raised in the large number of objections to the application have been noted and addressed within the report, and it's considered that the substantial scheme revisions that took place during the course of the application have suitably addressed the majority of concerns, and this was reflected in the response to the reconsultation. On balance, it's concluded that the benefits of the scheme are material considerations which can outweigh the failure to fully comply with the development plan and emerging policy. Overall, it's concluded that the proposed development would be acceptable, it would be high quality, it would provide 40% affordable housing, modernised workspace, and officers consider that planning permission should be granted, subject to the addendum, conditions and the completion of an appropriate Section 106 agreement.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Councillor Whittam. I think I know what this one's going to be, but go ahead.
Well, amenity space. There seems to be a bit of a double counting, but I'm most concerned about the table in paragraph 125 on page 31. You have some wildly different values for the size of the balconies. For example, 6 to 44 square metres. Now, if you have one 44 square metre one, that's enough for 4. Whereas if you have 6, you don't have enough space.
Yeah.
So are these counted as a shortfall of 6, a shortfall of 4 on the 6, and not an over provision of 34? and added together?
No. No. Any balcony that is 10 square metres or above is considered compliant. Anything that falls below 10 square metres, the difference between what's been provided and that 10 square metres is considered a shortfall. Credit isn't given for significantly oversized balconies. So the fact that there's a roof terrace that measures 44 square metres, it doesn't buy the applicant credit for balconies or roof terraces that fall below the 10 square metres.
But we don't know, what we don't know is how many of the balconies for the affordable housing is undersized.
Yeah, we can find that out. We have the information available.
Is it likely to be the affordable housing that's undersized?
It's spread throughout the development.
I would like to know that.
Yeah, but it is, so the family units are all compliant. It's the 1 and 2 beds that fall slightly below. I can look the information up. I'm conscious that the applicant might know, they might know it in terms of the breakdown, but from assessing the application, it wasn't restricted. The shortfall wasn't only on the affordable housing, it was all of the tenures.
Okay, we'll save that question for the applicants, but if you could do that bit of research in case we're not able to get that fully from the applicants, so we can pick that up later, that'd be helpful. Councillor Leeming.
I note that age group 12 plus are anticipated to be playing in the park. Will there be direct access to the park for anybody? You can't really restrict it to 12 plus. Will there be direct access to the park to make life easier and safer for this age group?
There won't be direct access to the park, and that's been a specific request from the Council's Parks Department, because these sites would, if there was to be direct access provided from these sites to the park, the access would open directly into the protected nature area, so it would have an adverse impact on the site of important nature conservation. As originally submitted, there was a route into the park as part of the 3 schemes. There was a route from this site into the Joseph Holmes site, and the Joseph Holmes site included a link into the park, but following more thorough consultation with the Council's Parks Department, they were really not supportive of the new route because of the impacts that it would have on the site of important nature conservation. So the route from the Joseph Holmes site into the park was removed, but this site still benefits from an access linking into the Joseph Holmes site in the amenity spaces there. But to answer your question, there isn't a direct link from this site into the park, and that's been a direct response from the consultation with parks.
Councillor,
Chair, sorry, if I might add, the actual access, to the park is simply on the pavement on Parkhouse Street, around and onto Wells Way, and back onto Burgess Park, which is a distance probably of about 200 metres, and doesn't involve crossing any roads or anything like that. So safety is not an issue, I would say, for that, certainly that age group.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I am quite interested in the tenure blind aspect of the proposed site. Is there any difference between those affordable homes and the ones that will be for private hire and private sale? And if there will be an issue that will come up later with associated costs ongoing?
The whole scheme has been designed as tenure blind, and as you can see from the elevations, there's absolutely no distinction between the parts of the building that would accommodate affordable housing and those that would accommodate market housing. And actually the residential entrance, whilst it does then separate into two cores, it is a single entrance, and the applicant will probably provide you with more information on this, but it is important to note that the applicant in this case is Dolphin Homes, and they have a long track record of providing affordable housing and housing for key workers, and I think that's come through in how the scheme's been designed.
Councillor Papula.
Chair, I wanted to ask, so of course it's noted on paragraph 141 that not all of the accommodation would be considered as exemplary. I just wanted clarification as to whether that fall in standard fell on the affordable homes side of the development or not.
It's an issue that would affect all tenures, and what it comes down to is a number of bathrooms that don't have windows. That was the specification in the table that the homes didn't comply with. So there's a table that sets out everything that needs to be achieved in order to achieve exemplary standard, and one of them is bathrooms having windows. In this case, the bathrooms don't have windows, but it's not restricted to it's not just the affordable homes that are affected, it's across all tenures.
And that's the only aspect that fails on the test for exemplary status.
On the rest of it, the homes, there was a high proportion of dual aspect units. The homes have bulk storage. They meet the floor-to-ceiling heights. They all meet or exceed the minimum floor space standards. And the only other issue was the issue of the 1 and 2 beds, some of them not having the 10 square metre balconies, which I referred to previously.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to check that I've understood the employment space part of the proposals, and I think my challenge is that the Class E class is so wide these days, it's quite hard to understand quite what the intent is. So the site's currently operating as light industrial distribution, and it's almost the same amount of square meterage that's being re-provided. And it might be a question for the applicant as well, is that, do you have a sense of the type of business that's envisaged to be based here within that very wide Class E? Partly because I'm quite conscious that it is an industrial site which had quite a lot, from looking at Google Earth, had quite a large servicing area in terms of servicing what was going on in terms of storage and distribution, but this scheme wouldn't have that. And so it's to get a sense of what the function is of that employment space, partly because it's hard to understand how those 3 units will be serviced at this stage and what servicing arrangements they might need.
Yeah, you're right. The applicant will probably have more information on than me in terms of the end users and prospective tenants, but it's very much seen as encouraging light industrial maker spaces for artisans. There's also the potential for some retail, and we can impose a condition limiting certain elements within use, because use Class E is so wide. We can impose a condition that limits certain aspects of it. Yeah. But yeah, the applicant will have more detail on who their prospective tenants are likely to be.
I would ask that.
I've got a couple of questions. So, first question relates to the table at the top of page 255, so that's at paragraph 12, about the mix of homes that are provided. I note that this is meeting 25% for social homes in terms of both numbers of units and numbers of rooms. But I'd also note that if you look at the private sector housing, there's a fair mix between the 1s, 2s and 3s about what's private, whereas for the social housing, it feels if it's weighted towards the 1s and 2s, and there's only 4 of the larger 3-bed units there that are social housing. So really just to understand how that was looked at, because obviously what we desperately need are larger homes, 3 bedrooms and more, to meet the family housing needs in the borough.
What table, what paragraph reference?
So paragraph 12, there's a table there that's setting out the mix.
The issue of housing mix is taken scheme-wide. There isn't a provision in the policy where the housing mix has to then be applied to the affordable housing. The housing is looked at development-wide in terms of the mix, so your minimum number of 3-bed units and so on. Again, as I said previously, the applicant, when they submitted the application at first, it was build to rent. They undertook research at the time, which, if I'm right, if I'm remembering it correctly, it indicated that the demand at that time for affordable was in 1 and 2 beds. They subsequently went away, redesigned the scheme, and came back with the new scheme at 40%. I think previously it was at 35%. But in terms of the housing mix, it's looked at development-wide. It's not looked at on a tenure basis. The tenure, the split that's required on affordable housing is between the tenures of social rent and intermediate. It doesn't refer to the housing mix in terms of 1, 2 and 3-bed units.
Thank you. Just to probe a little bit further. So if you look at those figures that are there in the table, a third of all the 1 beds are going to be social housing, so 8 out of 24. A third of all the 2 beds are going to be social housing, so 9 out of 27. But less than a quarter of the 3 beds that are being provided are going to be social housing. So what I'm not sure is quite how we've got to this position, because whilst I know and I've heard from developers in the past that there are some registered providers that are saying that it's 1s and 2s they particularly need, we know from when we look at our housing waiting list that the issue is for larger units, and that is something that has been reflected in our planning policy. So it's really to understand how our planning policy and our understanding of the need for larger social units has been applied in this case.
Thank you, Chair. I think the simple answer is that, to repeat what Terence said, the policy requires a certain mix across the whole development scheme, and the planning policy isn't as nuanced as that to say that for affordable housing we need a certain percentage of 3-bed plus. So it does comply with the policy as it is.
Okay, I've got another question. Sorry, Councillor Whittam. My second question is going to be on a different issue as well, so I'll let you go.
Just looking at paragraph 14, it seems to be that the public open space is wider pavement. Is that it?
But no, that's a public realm improvement. Sorry, that's a public realm improvement. The scheme, in the sense of public open space, and like, for instance, like the scheme you saw before at Colchurch House, this scheme doesn't provide that kind of public open space. It's not a big enough scheme. It doesn't have the layout that would allow for that kind of public open space to be provided. It's enclosed on 3 sides, and it has a fairly narrow street frontage onto Parkhouse Street.
But we're supposed to get 255 square metres.
Chair, if I might add, the site is on a curve, on a curve of Parkhouse Street, and on that, located on that curve, is a TPO tree. You will have seen it on some of the. There it is on the site plan over there. It's a very large, very prominent local landmark tree, I would call it. And so what the site has been designed to retain that tree, and in order to do that, the building is straightened up on Parkhouse Street. So the public space that you recognise there in the that's noted in the report is the actual significant opening up of the public realm on that curve to accommodate the tree and allow for the building to not affect that tree at all. So it's a sort of gift, if you like, of the development to the public realm, arising from the particular circumstances of the site. So it's noted, and it's actually, a gift as a result of the development that's noted there.
The 255 square metres that you're referring to, that's play space. That's going to be provided in the first floor roof terrace. The table at paragraph 14, it has public open space. Then it gives an explanation as to what that space will be. And then underneath it has the play space and what's being provided on site. The 255 square metres that's set out in that table is the 0 to 11 age group, and that's provided on the first floor roof terrace.
That's helpful clarification, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Leeming.
You can probably predict my question as well, but I note that there are a total of 14 visitor cycle spaces across this development, 9 in the residential aspect and 5 in the commercial units. And again, although this is deemed to be policy compliant, it does seem to me to be low, especially given that cycle levels are rising across the borough, and it's a borough policy to increase the level of cycling. And I wonder what scope there is for revisiting that, expanding that, and I'll the same question about non-standard cycles, family bicycles, cargo bikes, the works.
So the courtyard that you can see that's off to the right there, the developer can confirm, but there's adequate space within there for additional cycle parking. I mean, what I would say is the scheme meets the Southwark Plan cycle parking standards, which are very generous. There's probably scope to have additional residential cycle parking in the Resi Cycle store. In the courtyard off to the left there, which borders on to the Joseph Home site, there's adequate space in there for additional cycle parking. So it's one that we can discuss with the applicant in terms of additional cycle parking and the form that cycle parking takes.
I can see Alex itching to come in, so...
Sorry, if I can clarify that. The scheme meets the new Southwark Plan standard. We cannot ask the developer to provide over meeting that standard. So once it meets the standard, I think it meets the standard. What we can do is look at the proportion of the Sheffield, which I think might not be adequate, and say, okay, provide up to that 20% Sheffield cycle racks.
I'm not sure what you mean. Is that providing extra visitor?
Extra visitor. That's the Sheffield one. The idea is it will accommodate all categories of cyclists, the vulnerable, elder cyclists, and so on. So we can ask the developer to make sure that the 20% is provided. And within the 20%, the enlarged cycle spaces will be there, the cargo and the disabled spaces within the 20%.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? I just wanted to make sure we're making good use of John as he was here. Just nobody's asked any questions about ecology and Burgess Park in particular and the sink there. I know those comments were covered in the presentation, but John, if there's anything you wanted to add.
Thank you, Chair. Not really, only that the site that's being developed is very poor ecologically, and that the development will provide net gain through the soft landscaping. There's a sort of buffer zone between the park and the building, which is good. It's got a green roof, it's got some other complementary planting, and we also benefit from the habitat bank. So all in all, we sort of win on several layers, really.
Thank you. Okay. With that, we'll ask if there are any objectors that wish to speak on this application. I can't see any in the audience, but if there are any, if you want to indicate. I don't believe we have an objector. In that case, could we have the applicants or the applicants' agents coming forward to talk to us? So I understand it's David Stevenson from Dolphin Living, is that right?
Yes, Chair. I'm also joined by our architects, Matthew Morris from Ryder Associates, and also by James Coogan from Knight Frank, our planning consultants.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do is allow you 3 minutes to speak, and we'll take that away from now. Thank you.
Thank you much indeed, Chair. My name is David Stevenson. I'm the Director of Regeneration Development for Dolphin Square Charitable Foundation and represent the applicant. Thank you to the Chair and to the Council's officers who've worked extensively with us on this scheme. This is in front of you this evening. Just tell a little bit about Dolphin Square. Dolphin Square Charitable Foundation is a registered housing charity based in Victoria in central London. We were established in 2005 and are also a registered housing provider within our group structure known as Dolphin Living. Our mission is to provide high-quality, genuine, affordable home rental homes for working Londoners on modest incomes. We have over 800 homes in management for intermediate and social rent and located in 9 in the London boroughs, and most notably in Westminster, Ealing, Hackney, Camden and Lewisham. And we have a new development pipeline of over 300 homes, which includes this proposed development of Parkhouse Street. Since Dolphin acquired this site in 2017, we've remained committed to its development as a high-quality mixed-use residential commercial scheme with improvements to the public realm. We've carefully listened to the feedback from the council members and officers and members of the public and key stakeholders. We've consulted with local groups and consulted other developers working in the area following our initial planning application submitted in 2019, and we feel that we've vastly improved the design and aspects of the scheme. And we've made the following revisions to the application, which are before you. The first is that we're proposing a policy-compliant tenure mix now and have increased the affordable homes to 40% by unit and by habitable room, with 60% private sale being the balance. So we've moved away from our original proposal of having a build-to-rent scheme to a mix of affordable and 60% private sale. In terms of the design and appearance, we've reduced the overall density and massing of the development from 100 apartments to 85. We've reduced the height from to 6 stories with a 7th floor setback. All homes now meet or exceed space standards. 10% of the homes are wheelchair adaptable, and the design has been revised to make a positive contribution to the site and wider streetscape and better respond to the character and local history of the Parkhouse Street area. The front of the development is now further set back from Parkhouse Street to provide a more generous public street. The rear of developments further set back from the park boundary with no balconies projecting into the ecological buffer zone. We've retained the existing heritage warehouse brick wall and specified an exterior palette of red brick and dark grey metalwork, which we think is sympathetic to the area. The development's car-free with the exception of 3 disabled car parking spaces, and the play space has been enlarged with a better aspect onto Burgess Park, and we've also enhanced biodiversity, as you've already heard. The development is very carefully designed to be tenure blind to avoid residents and members of the public differentiating between tenures. In terms of the commercial space, there's a full reprovision of the existing commercial workspace, providing attractive and flexible, affordable workspace for light industrial makers, designers, for crafts, for offices and professional services, so some flexibility in terms of usage there. In terms of the energy strategy, that's been revised and updated following consultation with the Council's energy officer, and there's been a change in energy strategy which is proposed in favour of air source heat pumps to reduce on-site carbon emissions. In terms of commitment to the developments, 39 Parkhouse Street has been redesigned, as we've heard, to sensitively...
Sorry, that's your time up, I'm afraid, but thank you very much. Councillor Whittam?
Would you like to conclude your remarks?
Yes, please, Councillor, because I've almost got to the end of my presentation. So thank you, if that's okay with the Chair. The development's been sensitively redesigned to respond to the feedback that we've received. We've carefully listened to it. We'll provide much-needed affordable homes for rent and combined with market sale. And we've made a number of positive design changes working with officers and achieved development now, which is respecting the Burgess Park, the heritage access assets and the street scene. And we respectfully ask members to approve this development.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Any questions from committee? Councillor King.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to ask the question that I asked of officers following their presentation, which is if you could provide some more information about how that employment space has been designed and who you hope to attract. I'm not asking to be occupier specific, but it's just to get a sense of kind of what those what the jobs will be and what servicing arrangements those businesses might need.
Okay, so perhaps if I start by talking about the types of organisation we're looking to attract into the space, and then I'll perhaps ask Matt, our architect, just to make a comment about the actual design. So we're very much looking to encourage light industrial makers, designers, crafts. The space is flexible for offices and professional services. So there's quite a scope there, I think, in terms of the different types of organisation that could be attracted into the space. I think we've heard already that the space is flexible in terms of its subdivision. So it's notionally subdivided into 3 spaces, but it has some flexibility there. It could be created into 1 space if so desired. And I think we heard from Terence earlier that there is scope in terms of possible retail there as well. That gives you a flavour. Matt, we've got a mezzanine. You might want to say a few words about the actual design.
Yeah, I suppose this is a relatively small development, so these are going to be relatively small workspaces or maker spaces. We've designed some flexibility to allow for that to be adapted in the future. There's the service yard to the left side of the floor plan, and the aim of that is that these can be serviced from the side of the building without interrupting the public around or interrupting the street frontage. Each unit will be provided with its own service access opportunities as well, and vehicles would turn around in the service yard and exit back onto Parkhouse Street.
Councillor Whittam.
You'll have heard my question about balconies earlier. How many of the balconies that are undersized are for social rent as opposed to the market sale ones?
So it's a mix of terraces and balconies and a mix of tenures. So they all are compliant with the London plan, but a mix of them are below the additional Southwark requirement of the 10 square metres, and that loss, as Terence suggests, is made up by, in addition to the minimum requirement on that communal roof terrace, which you can see on the right-hand side of the plan over there. So it's a mix of tenures.
Can I just fill on that? I think it's important to remember, as Terence pointed out a couple of times in his presentation, the scheme has been designed in an entirely tenure-blind fashion, and as Matthew pointed out, there are some units which, yes, we acknowledge fall slightly short of a 10-metre balcony size, but they are comparable between private and social and intermediate units. There's no obvious difference or definition as to which units fall below the 10-metre, or sorry, which tenured units fall below the 10-metre standard and which don't. So there's effectively a comparable number of private units which don't meet the 10-metre requirement, as there are social and intermediate unit numbers. So reflecting the tenure-blind approach which has been adopted from the outset, there is essentially indistinguishable between which units meet and which units fall short of a 10-metre requirement.
Councillor Whittam, I have some provisional numbers.
Unless it's particularly germane to this, do you want to pick that up later? Unless that's,
yeah, it was relating to the numbers of balconies.
Okay.
The majority of the balconies that fall below are market balconies. On the 1-bed units on social rent, 6 of them have 7 square metres and 2 have 6 square metres. But on the market, one beds, 7 of them have 6 square metres and 8 have 7 square metres. Overall, there are 33 1 and 2 bed units in the market tenure that fall below the 10 square metres and 15 in the affordable.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Papula.
From a design point, could I ask why a number of properties have windowless bathrooms?
Really, this is a tight urban site, so what we've tried to do is maximise the number of affordable homes on the site. So in the nature of doing so, it's quite common to put bathrooms within the rear of the building floor plan, and in doing so it maximises daylight into bedrooms and living rooms.
Do you want to, is that a follow-up question, Councillor Papula?
Yeah, it's just that my just slight fear is that if a bathroom is windowless, it's far more likely to damp is far more likely to be created in those rooms, and there will be further issues about upkeep and service charge and all that jazz. So that's what came to mind with regards to a windowless bathroom and why that could be a problem.
So all the apartments feature MVHR, which are mechanical heat ventilation systems. So they provide fresh air from the external facade into bedrooms and living rooms, and then stale air is extracted from bathrooms. So there's a continuous loop of fresh air being recycled to ensure there's continuous ventilation.
Yeah, I think I'm right in saying, Matt, that there's a boosted as well there when the bathrooms are being used. So obviously there's extra ventilation when the bathroom's in use, which should alleviate any issues around dampness and mould growth in those situations.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's a slightly different design. It's the external design. Just looking at the elevation that will back onto the park, was there any, it's obviously quite a different brick to the existing warehouse brick. Was there any consideration of kind of getting a match to that, or is this a design specification that you've been working with?
Yes, a good question. I think what we're trying to do, and that image is quite telling, is create a clear differentiation between the historic warehouse brick, which is being retained on the park boundary, and the new building. So in doing so, it helps to create a definition for people who are going to view the building to understand what is old and historical and what is a new addition to the site.
Okay, any further? Councillor Leeming.
Speaking about brick and the butterfly motif, which I think pays reference to the Camberwell Beauty, it's a much more simple design than the one that is visible on memory from a nearby building just the other side of Wells Way. Did you think about making your brick, your Camberwell Beauty motif as visually stimulating to match the other one, or are you going for this more abstract? Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Design.
I like the term abstract. I think that's the aim, contemporary and abstract. I don't think we're trying to replicate the Camberwell Beauty on the side of the library. Instead, the proposal is to have a recessed and proud brick motif, which be integrated into the facade. So that's achieved by pushing in and pulling out bricks to make the pattern in the elevation.
And a follow-on question, I've just noticed the one on the left is not in the centre of that facade, should it be?
There's a slight step in the facade. You might be able to see in the middle of that there's a step in the building elevation, hence why it has to be to one side of that step. Well spotted there.
Okay, I wanted to return to the question that I asked officers about the relatively small number of 3-bedroom social housing units, and just to get your comments to understand why that is.
Sure. So we're policy compliant in terms of number of homes and mix of homes as well. There's 8 affordable 3-bedroom, 5-person homes, and there's 13 private homes, so I've got that the other way around. So the other bit to add is that the affordable are 3-bed, 6-person homes, so that the affordable homes will be larger. The private, the 3-bed, 5-person homes. So relatively, even though there's fewer numbers of affordable, they are larger homes as well.
Sorry, just to clarify. Might be a bit of confusion. The point Matthew was mentioning, the 3-bedroom homes which fall within the affordable tenures are designed for occupancy of 6 people, which is obviously meeting a greater family need than those 3-bedroom homes which are within the private tenures, which are for 3-bed, 5-person, so they are slightly smaller, and the 3-bedroom homes, as a result, in the affordable tenures have been designed to maximise family occupation and be able to be occupied by larger family groups, which we understand is where the need is in the 3-bedroom. In 3-bedroom homes, in affordable tenure, the need is for bed spaces, and that's why the affordable 3-bedroom homes have been designed for 6-person accommodation rather than 5-person accommodation, as is the instance for private.
And the reason for the the pattern of 1s, 2s and 3s for social housing, why there seems to be more emphasis on the 1s and 2s rather than the 3?
Do you want to come, Jeff?
Sorry, Stuart Bailey from Knight Frank as well. I think there's been a slight misunderstanding on the 3-bed size homes. Of the 51 private homes, there are 13 3-beds, which is 25%. Of the 34 affordable homes, there are 8 3-bed affordable, which is 23%. So there's only a 2% difference in the number of 3 beds from affordable to private in percentage terms. It wasn't clear from the report.
Thank you, Stuart. All right. Any further questions for the applicants from any committee member? No? Okay. Thank you very much for presenting to us. Yes, if you could return to the public gallery, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. Thank you. And officers, thank you.
That brings us to any supporters who live within 100 metres of the site. Is there anybody in the room who is a local resident living within 100 metres of the site that wishes to support the scheme? No. We don't have any ward councillors present either. And indeed, I got a message from the ward councillors to say that they wouldn't be coming along. So they did make the point of letting me know that they wouldn't be coming. So that brings us to any further questions you might have for officers. No further questions to officers. Any comments or statements that anybody would like to make on the application? No? Okay. In that case, I would like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraphs 1 to 2 of the report at page 253 of the main agenda pack, and at paragraphs 2 on page 1 of the addendum. So that is that the planning permission is granted subject to conditions and the applicant entering into appropriate legal agreement by no later than the 31st of December 2022. In the event that the requirements of 1 are not met by the 31st of December 2022, for the Director of Planning Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission if appropriate for the reasons set out in paragraph 218 of this report. And thirdly, that members note and consider the information received in respect of each item in reaching their decision. Is there any member that wishes to second this?
Was the additional condition on cycle parking so that could increase provision of the Sheffield stands?
Dipesh, do you want to?
So thank you, Chair. I believe there was some discussion and a request for the cycle parking condition to be amended to include additional Sheffield stands.
Chair, I just wonder whether that should be as a Section 106 obligation. So if we do cycle parking by 106, then there was also, I think, some discussion about a Class C restriction.
It was more about the end user. there wasn't an objection to the range of uses.
Okay, so that didn't, okay, so it's just the section 106 obligation relating to cycle parking and Sheffield stands.
Thank you. Okay, with that condition within the section 106, is there anybody willing to second the proposal? That has been seconded by Councillor King. So I'm going to turn to people to ask how they wish to vote on this application. Councillor Whittam.
For, Chair.
Councillor King.
For, Chair.
Councillor Leeming.
For, Chair.
Councillor Papula.
For, Chair.
Councillor Roberts.
For, Chair.
Councillor Soanes.
For, Chair.
And I'm Councillor Livingstone and I'm voting for the motion. So the motion is carried and the application is granted. That brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. So thank you everybody and safe journey home.